interviewing. You know, that's what they doing. Stick around. It's about to get all roomy up in here. Remote Ruby starts now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Remote Ruby. I'm Andrew Mason here with the one, the only Chris Oliver. Chris, how's your day?
I like it. I just got back from Micro Center, actually, and got the brand new Mac Studio that released yesterday. Excited to set that up. Yeah. I have an old M1 Max MacBook Pro, which is great. Still awesome. But building Hatchbox, for example, I've got to have a whole bunch of virtual machines. And so it helps to have a whole lot more CPU cores and RAM and stuff. And I've got a desktop that I can SSH into and do that, but only when I'm at home. So sometimes when I'm traveling, conference season that's coming up, it'll be very helpful to have all that on my laptop. But the other thing that we're doing is doing all this video stuff. So the Ultras actually have double the video encoders, the media engines. So I wish I had this before we started the Learn Hotwire course, because I did like 60 videos so far, probably more to come. And that doesn't include any of William's Hotwire native stuff for iOS and Android. And it would have been great to be able to export all those videos at twice or faster, because the M2 Ultra that I tested last November was phenomenal because it's got double the video encoders. But I was like, well, I'll wait because the Mac Mini is pretty dope with the M4s and whatever. That didn't end up being the M4 Ultra that came out on the Mac Studio. Whatever. It's still awesome.
Yeah.
It maybe isn't as good on single threaded stuff, but it's close enough. So who cares? I'm not waiting for a Mac Pro that starts at $7,000. So this will work. This will do the job. And then the cool part is literally, it blows my mind, but Micro Center, even day one of this brand new Mac Studio, 10 or 15% off. They have discounts on stuff that literally just launched that I would end up paying considerably more at the Apple Store. Thank God we have a Micro Center here.
I don't think we do. No plans at the moment for Micro Center in Phoenix. Very cool.
Oh, that sucks. They're such a good store. They're one of the only places that you can like go buy stuff like that anymore. Best Buy doesn't carry any computer parts and whatever.
Yeah.
They feel like a as seen online showcase store these days. They're ridiculous.
I haven't done it recently, but sometimes when I was bored or like needed to wait for something or just to like do it, I would go to Best Buy to like kind of window shop. Sometimes I do it to go look at keyboards. It's just like, there's just really nothing here that I would buy.
Yeah. Dude, at Micro Center, I just saw yesterday on Reddit that it sounds like they did a deal with Ubiquiti. So they're going to start offering like, or having kiosks with all the Ubiquiti wireless access points and Dream Machines. And they sell the cameras now, which I've needed some more cameras and had to just order them from Ubiquiti and get it shipped to me and pay for shipping and wait. And now I can just go pick them up in store, which is awesome. So I'm pretty stoked.
We don't have Micro Center, but we are getting Bojangles. So I'm pretty hyped.
Yeah.
I love
it's either one or the other. You just need one of the two.
One or the other, and we're good.
They're pretty much just perfect replacements for each other, I think.
Dude, I want to tell you about something really frustrating that happened to me this week.
Yes, I want to hear this.
My coworker was like, hey, I'm having issues with the site editor. Like, it's not doing these live updates for some reason. And it was working earlier. That's weird. Just watching it a little bit. Let's see if he figures this out. And like a few minutes later, he's still not figuring it out. All right, I got to walk out the door. But when I get back, if you're still having trouble, I'll help you. Got back, still having trouble. All right, let's figure this out. And it appeared to be an error in cable ready. We're getting a warning somewhere in cable ready. Number one, it worked on my machine. And so
there you go. You don't have to worry about it after that.
Exactly. So I didn't get the same warning. I didn't get the same I didn't get any of the same behavior. So I was like, okay, it's either one of two things. It's either your computer or your database.
Was this not happening in production?
No, it worked in production.
Okay.
It was just on one developer's machine.
Okay.
So We did all the debugging steps, bro. Like, I'm like racking my brain. This doesn't make any sense. Like, we're getting down in there. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. All right, it's got to be your database or your computer. And I got the database out of the way really quickly because I had taken code that Nate had added to CodeFund like a long time ago. And I've carried it with me to this day that like does a DB dump and a DB restore. All right, dump your database so that we can restore it later if it's not the problem. Start from a fresh database, seeded everything. The app works fine. Still not working. Site editor, still not working. What the hell? All right, keep going. Tried everything, dude. Jason even joined the call later. Couldn't figure it out. And at the end of it, I was like, dude, I just don't understand. There's got to be a bug somewhere. We're trying to debug these WebSockets. We're trying to follow the network, everything.
Yeah.
He restarted his computer and it worked. But now my question is, what could possibly have prevented these WebSocket connect? There's nothing in my brain like I can rack around to like make this make sense. Like tried multiple browsers, tried everything. Yeah. It makes no sense to me. I don't understand.
I feel like I had some issue like that recently and it was like forever be a mystery. I will never know. I hate those. Those eat at me for so many hours, days sometimes afterwards. I just want to know. The more I understand about this stuff, the better. And those mysteries, I would really, really, really love to know.
And that's why I'm saying it here, because I'm like, I need to know. Maybe somewhere out there, someone listening is like, oh, I've seen this and I actually know why. And they'll let me know. And that would be great because it's really bothering me.
DM Andrew if you know what the issue was.
Let me know.
Yeah, that's just super frustrating. You reminded me of, speaking of super frustrating, real quick, Colin messaged me like half an hour ago. So he's going through our Learn Hotwire course, making notes and then following the exact code that I wrote. Because I had like a prototype of what I was going to do, but then deviated from that while I was recording to make it feel more natural and kind of fit the flow better. And so he's going back and basically following every step of code, recreating it, making sure that we have the exact commits for every lesson and whatever. Because yesterday I found a video that I forgot to move my face from the middle of the screen to the corner or whatever. And I thought that was going to be another one he found of that. It was not. He was like, it's a code issue. And I was like, oh no. Because the worst part, when I have done a weekly screencast isn't too bad. I can just throw it away and restart. But in the middle of a course, I have to reset all my code back to where that was or whatever as best you can. There have been times where I've taken a screenshot from my editor and overlaid it onto the video. I was about to say,
you fix it in post, bro. Fix it in post.
Yeah. But then the worst part becomes if you are explaining something and you're tabbing between two files, one of the files happens to have the wrong code in there. You have to then edit that constantly. And then God forbid you scroll and then you have to move that around with it and follow it around. And this just isn't worth the hassle. And luckily, I think it's one where it's like, that's the last time we touched it. So we're good. And actually the code worked just fine in the video. It just was pointing to the wrong URL for something.
Okay.
It was okay. Technically, it was fine. It was just supposed to go somewhere else to show off a feature of turbo frames or whatever. And
dude, that's like, a nightmare.
Because he told me that and I just dread immediately.
Because I'm the type of person, like, if I'm trying to follow like a coding tutorial and all of a sudden I see like slightly different code, I'm like, wait, did I miss something? And I'm going to think I made a mistake. So yeah, I can, dude, that's this, if you did in the middle of the nightmare and that's crazy.
It's so hard. When I started Go Rails, I wanted to include typos and errors and stuff and just show my debugging process. But that also pulls you out of what you're learning. And you're like, what the hell is this tangent? And then you lose track of what you're actually learning. And so it's not actually a good idea to include that stuff. Basic, very minor things isn't too bad. But it's usually like there's some big error screen. And we're all kind of stunned for a second. And then you read it, you end up processing the last 12 years of memories really fast and being like, I think I saw this before somewhere. And then all of a sudden you have the answer. And there's no way you can explain that process that just happened in 100 milliseconds as you saw this big error screen.
Like, things.
Then the viewer is just like, what? What just happened? How did they know the answer to that? And it's not very helpful after all. I thought it could be cool, but debugging is really one of the hardest things to teach for that reason, I feel like.
And there's so much context. Like today, I'm doing some stripe changes that I've been moaning on this podcast about for the past few weeks, which I could moan more, but I'm not going to. But I'm testing it right now in production behind a feature flag. And someone on support was like, I found this error. This happened. And then this happened. And I was looking at it and I knew exactly, as soon as they sent it, I knew exactly what the problem was. And the problem is that if you have an account with credit on it and you check out, Stripe will not send a subscription updated if the payment on
was covered by the credit.
Was covered by the credit. So they only send a subscription created event. And I just knew that because I'd already run into a lot of problems with it. So as soon as I saw that, I instantly knew that problem.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. That makes sense because it probably has the latest charge attribute or whatever that gets updated on the subscription, which
it comes in as active too.
Wouldn't have a charge. Yeah.
And
fascinating.
The funny part was that the code that was causing the problem was added because of this issue previously. We saw this previously happening. We're like, oh crap. Now we have to account for this in our subscription created webhook. And that was the problem. It was nice because I was actually like, oh, I can just feature flag this code. We actually don't need to do this anymore because of some changes I made. But I was like, that's one of those things like that could have taken someone a long time to figure out. And I just happened to have known that because I had seen that on a previous project.
Right.
And that's a weird edge case because there's no reason for the most part that these users would have credit, but we've seen it break in production because of this.
Yeah. This is funny because there are some obscure Hatchbox tickets that we get that are like, my domain doesn't work or whatever. Sometimes we can help you with that. Other times, this is your code. The deployment ran, Puma's running, your Rails app is running. We can't help you debug your own code. But there are times where someone will have some weird thing come through that will maybe take me an hour to debug or something. I might not come up with a solution for why it's happening or something. It's just really strange. And we're running on your servers. So there's a lot that we don't control, which makes debugging things a lot harder than if we owned everything. Because we could just say, like, let's just swap out your box and do that or whatever. But that's not the case. And so it's so funny because there will be the two different types of people. The one person will come in with the ticket and like, stuff's broken. I need help. It's urgent. My site's down. Okay, what's broken? What's urgent? If it was so urgent, why didn't you tell us anything about the details about what's happening? And they're just kind of in a panic or whatever. Then there are the other people that write a ticket in to tell you enough detail that you're like, you're right. That is a weird exception that I hadn't thought of. And I know exactly what's wrong and how to fix it. And they just give you enough of the context and the specifics that you're like, oh, of course. And you immediately know the issue and how to fix it. And it's one of those situations like the credit for Stripe subscriptions. I might have seen that before, but I don't deal with credit on user accounts very often. So it doesn't really cross my mind ever. And yeah, that's a good example of that where somebody like gives you just enough context. Because if you didn't know there wasn't credit on the subscription, you'd be like, what happened now? And you'd have to spend a lot more time poking at the API, getting the records back, just looking for anything weird. That one little line of credit is not going to be that weird. You're just going to be like, where did that thing go? Because it's missing. That webhook is completely missing. How do you even debug that? You don't. You can't, because it just was an external system that you don't control. And it did something different this time. And you're like, but why did it do that? And now you're having to just imagine the internals of Stripe to debug the problem. And that takes forever. But then somebody gives you that little hint. Figured it out. I know exactly what you mean. Those are super fun times when you're like getting those support tickets because they're just, yes, thank you. I appreciate this because you understand the process here. And that's awesome. I like that a lot.
What happens when a developer decides to record his own podcast ad? Let's find out. I'm Adam from JudoScale, and at JudoScale, there's no marketing team, no salespeople, and no customer support. I mean, we do have customer support, but it's just us, the developers. That's why our support is top-notch. Anyway, we're JudoScale. We're the autoscaler that actually works. We do it better than anyone else by tracking the right metrics and checking those metrics more frequently. And we wrap it all in a beautiful UI with powerful and intuitive controls. We work with hosting platforms like Heroku, Render, and Amazon ECS to gracefully handle your traffic spikes and backed up job queues. If you want that peace of mind and a much lower hosting bill, you should check us out. Visit judoscale.com/remote Ruby for your special gift as a remote Ruby listener. That's judoscale.com/remote Ruby.
Dude, speaking of tickets and the context, we've had a dramatic Hamel reading on this show once. Can I do a dramatic GitHub issue reading?
I would love to hear this.
I'm going to try to censor as much as possible. The title of the ticket is "This Thing Deleted 3 Months of Work," all caps. I had just downloaded VS Code as an alternative, and I was just playing with the source control option. Seeing how it wanted to stage 5,000 files, I clicked discard, and it deleted all of my files, all of them, permanently. How the F is this BS possible? Who the hell is the dumb F who made this option to permanently delete all the files on a project by accident even possible? Cannot even find them in the recycle bin. I didn't even think this was possible on Windows. F this effing editor and F whoever implemented this option. I wish you the worst. I am permanently staying away from every Windows development software from now on. And to the genius who implemented this, and it goes on for like about 20 lines, just repeating FU in all caps. Most of this issue was in all caps, but that's one of my favorite issues of all time in regards to the context that they provide of,
Yeah, I have empathy for you because if you're not familiar with Git, you can understand how that could happen.
I can totally understand. If 5,000 files, dude, is not chump change, dude.
Yeah.
3 months worth of work. I have a lot of empathy.
And then you're also like, the hell are you doing with 3 months of work, 5 months worth of work, and you didn't save any of it? You didn't back up any of it? What are you doing?
There's so many points of failure in this saga.
What if your hard drive broke or something?
I did as a kid. I accidentally borked our hard drive when I was a kid trying to mess around in like the subsystem of Windows. I think at that moment, my mother, she lost almost all her photos. Like we went to like every computer place in town trying to like get it back. And apparently if I had just not canceled the operation that was running, it would have been fine. But because I canceled it, it corrupted the hard drive basically.
Oh no.
And from that moment on, she loved me less. I was in huge trouble from that. Considering like the severity, it's not that crazy, but oh my God, that was not a good time.
Those are fascinating times. Well, and even something like that, like canceling the operation can have destructive results. That was bad code from somebody. It shouldn't have corrupted anything by doing that. There's so many little things, little decisions you make writing code or something that can have adverse effects like that you may not be aware of. Speaking of old stuff like that, visiting my parents this past weekend, it was really fun because Jackson got to play with all my old toys that were at my parents still from being a kid.
What you got? What you got, bro?
But I went into the basement because my parents are in the process of building a house and trying to clean up just old junk that's accumulated over the 20 some 30 years they've been at their house. And just go in the basement. There's all the old Diablo CDs and Baldur's Gate and whatever else. And I'm like, this is awesome. But I found the old floppy disks that were like Chris's QBasic stuff. This is what I've wanted for so long. So I have them with me. And I bought a floppy drive that's got a USB-C thing on it. So I can actually plug it into a computer that I own. But yeah, I can't wait. I'm going to back that stuff up to GitHub, and hopefully it's got the Hangman game that I really learned to code building and stuff.
You found your origin story, bro.
Literally, I was in grade school learning math, and they're talking about variables and stuff. And I'm trying to write a Hangman game, and I don't understand that you can reuse a variable. You can assign it once. I didn't know you could assign it again. And I was like, just reading from this book. The examples are simple. I think I still have the book on my shelf back there for Atari Basic. Copy paste this into the editor and run it. And here you have a calculator and whatever else. And that was my first big attempt to go make a game that was purely on my own without any help conceptually or architecture or whatever. I wasn't copying anybody's work. And it became this ginormous thing at a certain point because I wrote it and then I rewrote it and it was like a tenth of the size and it had a million more features because I started to learn loops and variables and the basics and really understand them then. So I don't know if I ever I didn't think about preserving any of that back then. So I don't know if I actually have the original code, but I might have like the last version I did, which is going to be cool. And then that weekend, me and my dad drove out to Kansas City because the laptop I coded on, there was one for sale that if you Google that laptop model, my tweet about that laptop is the thing that comes up and like a PDF that shows that it existed at one point, but that's about it. Because somebody upgraded it to Windows 95 and it never had enough RAM to really run that. So I'm going to put it back to Windows 3.1 and then maybe play my Hangman game again.
Nice.
It's like 20 years ago.
There's only one thing at my parents' house that I'm going to take when it's time to take things, and that's my Legos. And my brothers have some weird conception that they are going to get part of them. And my mom has this weird idea that they're going to get part of it too. And that's all well and good. But when the time comes, I will be leaving that house with every single one of the Legos that exist.
The Legos were the best.
And you have
so good.
Baldur's Gate 1. I played Baldur's Gate 3 recently.
I've got Baldur's Gate 1 and 2.
Nice.
And I have some floppy disks of StarCraft maps that I made and other stuff. Because I think Baldur's Gate 1 or 2, as you're exploring and learning software development, this character.cfg or whatever the file extension was, you're like, I wonder if I can open that up in a text editor. It's a dot weird extension and it's not a normal .txt or something. So you don't know. Then you just open it and it's just plain text. So I can change all my skills and maximize all the stuff. There is no real protection against that. And that is kind of mind blowing because all of a sudden this black box is like, this is no different than anything I just made myself. This is wild. That I feel like learning in grade school was so mind blowing that really changed my perspective on just life in general. Everything's a lot more simple than you expect in so many cases. It just feels complicated or whatever because you're interacting through this video game. You're writing a text file. You could just go straight to the text file if you ever want to mess with things. And that was super fun and sort of the stuff that got me interested in security in the early days.
Yeah, same.
Hacking Xboxes. You ever do that?
No, I didn't have an Xbox. I tried to hack some online games successfully and unsuccessfully. At some point in my childhood, like I got in big trouble online and was banned pretty much from using the internet. So I didn't get a PlayStation until I was older.
The movie Hackers was your origin story.
I got in a lot of trouble on the internet as a child. But anyway, Rails stuff this week. Rails 8.0.2 came out. Rails.
I didn't see much. It was just a maintenance release thing.
Yeah.
So the other thing that dropped along with that, Jorge, was it this week or last week? It might have been this weekend. Either way, it was like within the last 7 days. But Jorge updated Trix so that Trix is now compatible with morphing. It's really simple. The way it works is it adds the connected attribute, and if connected goes away, it will reconnect. It's a great little PR to see how that works. But that's been missing for a stupid long amount of time, so I'm glad to see that. And it's one of the things they probably didn't use tricks on any of the pages they were morphing, but people have been doing that for a long time. It's kind of a weird thing to want to do, though, because it's
not really. Could you morph like a @ user into like a dynamic embed or something?
I don't know. You would really want to have that,
or like a word count, maybe, as you're adding.
I wouldn't want to do like.
Well, yeah, I know you wouldn't, but I'm just I'm spitballing, bro.
The risk would be that you end up blowing away text that you've changed, and so that seems risky. I don't know. Maybe people are data turbo permanent on it or something. But
maybe when you get to a certain amount of characters, then the post is publishable. So you undisable like a submit button or somewhere.
Yeah, you could do that.
Ooh, if you have the first line of the tricks document is your title. So when you update the first line of the document, it updates the page header.
Yeah. Speaking of this, I was listening to the Rework podcast this week, and DHH mentioned they hired a JavaScript contractor to help get HouseMD and tricks updates out the door, which is sweet. So hopefully we'll see some of that soon. Jorge also mentioned that, what was it? Hey, Calendar is now searchable as of like a week or two ago or something. And I was like, ooh, maybe that's Active Record Search. Yeah. But no, it turned out they're already using Elasticsearch or whatever for Hey. So
Nightmare.
Hey and Hey Calendar makes sense to use the same thing. But I was like, man, when are we going to get Active Record Search? And I think it's probably got the similar kind of constraints as SolidQ, where it's different nuances between SQLite and Postgres and MySQL are going to make that a lot harder to maintain, which I know is part of the complexity of building that in the first place. Because we had Good Job, and I know that Rosa and was it Ben wrote Good Job? I can't remember.
I'm not sure.
I don't think I ever used Good Job myself, but
no, I haven't either.
I know that it was a great job.
They did a good job building it.
Yeah, it was Ben Sheldon.
I've seen it used, and I've seen it in gem files before, and I've always been like, oh, that's a good option if I'm ever working on an app that I need a background processor and it's not Sidekick.
Yep. It's good stuff. I imagine there was a lot of complexity in that because Ben working on Good Job made it specific to Postgres, which is way easier to do because there are features of Postgres that SQLite did not have or whatever that made things just much more manageable, I think, in certain areas or whatever. And SQLite is constantly evolving, and MySQL too, and so is Postgres for that matter. So one of them adds a feature, and then they're all kind of like, I guess we should probably do that to be compatible, and we need to keep our market share or whatever. If Oracle owns MySQL. So I'm sure that there's lots of that stuff going on behind the scenes and whatever, but can't be that easy just because those are the JSON columns all query a little differently and yada, yada. Lots of nuance to it all. Honeybadger helps you fix errors, eliminate performance bottlenecks, and dig into the details faster than ever before. With support for Ruby, Elixir, and 8 other languages, it's the best way to gain real-time insights into your application's health and performance. Keep your apps fast and error-free at honeybadger.io. That's www.honeybadger.io.
Rails World CFP is open.
Yes, it is. We should add a link to that in the notes.
I think I might actually submit one.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I haven't submitted one in years.
Have you ever talked at a conference? I can't even remember.
Bro.
You were, we did
on
that
stage beside you.
Yeah, that was a weird talk.
We made it work, bro. No, I haven't. I've done some virtual stuff. I like speaking in public. I enjoy the performance part of it and also the attention part of it. And I used to submit CFPs to every single conference. And then at some point after like all the rejection, maybe I stopped doing this, but then that wasn't really what stopped me. What really stopped me was going to conferences with Jason. I used to always submit CFPs. And as soon as I started going to conferences with Jason, I stopped immediately because I was watching what he goes through during a conference that he speaks through, I was like, I don't want to do this. I want to come here and have fun and enjoy myself. And this seems awful. So I stopped doing it because of the way it would impact Jason. I was like, I don't want this.
I can see that. I still stress out quite a lot. And the only way I can like get around that to an extent was when the three of us did that talk, I was losing my mind a little bit on it. Because for me to get over like the stress of the talk is more or less to have the damn thing memorized. So then I can get up there and just kind of wing it. And I don't have to stress about it because I could sit and talk for 4 hours about whatever topic if I really needed to or whatever. So I feel much, much more comfortable doing a talk as long as I've had it memorized. But that talk that we did,
with the ADHD boys.
Well, yeah, that was also when like one of the kids went to the ER or something while Jason was at the conference. He wasn't sure if he was going to go back home and skip half the conference. And then he gave us the slides. We didn't really know what he was doing with them or what his goals were. So then we tried to fill it out.
We hadn't worked on it at all.
He was the only one that had worked on it, really. And then we tried to fill out stuff. Then he decided he didn't need to go back home, redid the slides again. And then we were basically on stage giving a talk that we had never really seen before.
But we'd also finished the slides about 5 to 10 minutes before we walked onto stage.
Yeah. Which can help a little bit because it's so fresh in your mind. But also for me, it was just so stressful because I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to get up here and say.
Well, then I got to air something out about the stress of that day now that we're talking about it. You want to know what stressed me out that day, Chris? That day.
Yes, I do.
We had 30 minutes for that talk, I believe. We had tried to split it up into 10-minute increments. So Jason spoke for 10 minutes, and then you were second, and you spoke for like 17.
Yeah.
And then I had to sped run the last part as quick. Like while you're talking, I'm like watching you talk, watching this clock tick down. Bro, I might attack you on stage right now because what are you doing?
That was like what I had to do because I don't know what I'm up here to say. So I just kind of rambled and we made it work.
We made it work. Yeah, no regrets. Killed it.
So this is interesting. We are going to pick the talks for RailsConf here in the next few days. And it took me like 4 hours straight, if not more, of reviewing the talks. Because in Sessionize, we have it where we use that, you submit your talks to it. Then once they're all finished and like, these are the talks that were submitted, you go through and rank every talk against every other talk. And it's all anonymous so that people have as fair of a chance as possible and everything. And that process, when you've got to rank every single talk against every other talk, the more talks you get, the bigger your permutations are. And it's, oh goodness.
Yeah.
And then that is tough. Now we've gotten 250 submissions or whatever the number is. And we got to narrow that down to 30 slots or whatever your thing is. Because I've never been on this side of the table before. So I've submitted talks. I've put in decent ones, put in terrible ones, and also seeing from the other side of the table, the people who put in and submit good talks, you can tell very quickly the difference between those and pretty much everything else. Because some people will put in like a sentence as their submission. Well, what are we going to do with this? We don't know who the audience is for this. We don't know if it's for beginners or we don't have any clue what you're even going to talk about for 30 minutes. How do we even give you a fair chance on that? You didn't put in effort to submit your talk. So how do we expect you to submit or to actually give a talk and put any effort into that either? You have to say no on those. And then you get the other end of the spectrum. This person knows exactly what they're going to talk about. They've got the whole thing planned out already. They don't have to have the specifics in the talk finished. They just have the bullets. And they've thought about who's the audience for this? What are some good title options? How does this address the community, either specifically and only beginners focused, or it's for everybody, or it has only advanced kind of stuff? And that makes it great because then we can say, like, we want some advanced stuff. We want some beginner stuff. We want some stuff that everybody can get value from. And ideally, maybe you're in that middle where everybody can get value from this. And that was eye-opening to go through that. Now I know how to submit a conference talk much better. And Ruby Central does such a good job too with the CFP practice stuff where you can go ask for help and your submissions and all that. Until you've seen other people's submissions, it can be really impossible for you to know what even to write. And you have to really think about, as an organizer, what are they looking for? And they kind of tell you that in the CFP stuff, but when you're really analyzing a talk, it's like, who is this for? Will a brand new person just be completely obliterated by eigen classes and advanced Ruby stuff? And maybe that's a good thing, because maybe that gets them to dig in deeper into Ruby or whatever. But if it's too basic, too beginner or whatever, maybe that's not a great fit for what you're aiming for or whatever. And it's been interesting to go read whatever number it was. It was something like 200 something submissions that we got for RailsConf. And I have a big appreciation for any of the organizers now, because, man, that is a lot of work.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I know a bit. I've seen a bit of behind the scenes before, because I know a lot of people who do stuff behind the scenes. So what always gets me, though, and what always frustrates me is, like, I'm the type of person who feels like, because of the American education system, I'm like, I have to put as much on paper as possible to make it look like I know what I'm talking about. The best proposals I see are the ones that get submitted, that get picked, are not like that at all. And I'm like, oh, doing something wrong. But there's some great resources out there to help with that.
Yeah, I feel like there were some that were just kind of very lengthy submissions, sort of for the sake of length. And those don't necessarily mean they're a good submission, because as you're reading through all these, you're just, this is a lot of stuff. And I just need to know the highlights. What's the talk about? What are you going to cover? Who's it for? How does it fit our theme and what we're trying to do here? And that was probably the biggest one that most of them missed, because most of the submissions were like thinking about their talk, as opposed to how do they provide a talk that fits our theme? And our theme being the very last RailsConf is, let's get excited about the past, the present, and the future. And a lot of them were just, I got this thing I want to talk about. Okay, but that doesn't really fit at all in our goals for the theme of the conference. So those tend to get ranked differently, because you're like, it's probably a good talk, but I don't know if it fits here, especially when we have so many submissions and we got to filter them down. So if I was to give one piece of advice on writing your CFP, it's like, nail that. How does it fit into the theme? I think that is the biggest thing that I noticed. I know I've submitted stuff and it was like, I'm worried about trying to figure out, do I have anything of value to talk about? Because that was my biggest struggle. I need to teach people stuff in a talk, but I'm just a noob. And how am I going to teach anyone? And the reality is, like, you can teach anybody more beginner than you. Anybody who spent one day less programming than you, or they can spend more. You just got into some interesting Stripe webhooks very deeply. You've got valuable stuff to talk about there that most people who have never touched payments would have no idea. The interesting decisions and struggles around that stuff. So you've almost always got some angle that you can talk about, but convincing yourself that you do sometimes can be tough. At least that was my case.
I put a link to our friend Nadia's speakerline.io. If you've never heard of it, it's got a bunch of examples of conference proposals. And I also link my favorite blog post that I link every single time we talk about CFPs, from Sarah May, on what your conference proposal is missing. So find those in the show notes.
I forgot about Speakerline. This is so awesome.
Yeah. Shout out to Nadia.
Well, and Nadia has been keynote speaker at many, many conferences now. So, And there's the speaker on here, Andrew Mason.
I think I submitted my failed CFPs, the ones that didn't get submitted.
That's funny.
Before we wrap up, unless you got anything else.
No, other than Rails World submissions end April 10th, 2025. So I am very deep in this right now, because the next meeting is for RailsConf. Then I have until next Friday, I think, to put my keynote together for Tropical on Rails. I've also got to put a talk together for Sin City Ruby. And I think we got 30 minutes or something. Jason Sweat is the most casual person. I was like, how much time do I have? It's just kind of like, 30, 45 minutes, whatever. Whatever you want to do is cool with me. And I was like, that's wild. Usually there's a schedule and everything. I love that. But I think that's kind of what makes that Sin City Ruby a special conference, because it's just
chill,
so much more
bruh.
chill like that. Yeah, I love it.
Bruh.
I've been working on what do I submit to Rails World this year. It was kind of nice, though, last year not having to speak and just showing up and hanging out. If I do have to give a talk the second day, the first day, I'm sitting there the whole time trying to remember my talk, just make sure it's fresh in my mind. Is there anything I want to change? And yada, yada. Or like in Australia, at RubyConf Australia, they had closed captions. Those were not on a separate screen, though. They were overlaid on your slides. And then your screen was actually a little low. So people couldn't see like the lower third of your slides. And I had code snippets that ended up going to the bottom of the screen sometimes. So luckily, the day before, I got to see that and then adjust my slides so that it actually fit better. And that was like just one of those weird things that you run into where you're like, okay, flying by the seat of my pants, but I'm going to like make this work better for my talk. So thankfully I had the second day to give it and revise it the first day. But yeah, I'm excited.
I am too.
I feel like it's been a while. I guess RubyConf Chicago was the last one. It wasn't that long ago, but it feels like it was.
Feels like it was, yeah. I've got a video game update before we wrap this up.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So I finished my first playthrough of Cyberpunk, and I woke up the next morning and I messaged my project partner, Diogo. Shout out, Diogo. We've been working on the same stuff for a long time. Our brains are like in sync at this point. And we got on a call that morning to pair, and I was like, dude, I had to say goodbye to my desert girlfriend. And I worded it like that because of the way Paul had written something in our show notes. And I had just recently posted the episode that we talked about that in. He's like, oh, dang, dude. Thought I got broken up with. And was like trying to console me. I was like, wait. In a video game.
You do live in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Desert girlfriend, really fitting.
He's
there.
from Brazil. So like he takes a lot of what I say, like literally. I was like, dude, imagine I launched that on you the first thing in the morning. The first thing I say to you is like, yeah, I got dumped last night. But I finished my first playthrough. I ended up ending it a little early, like because I had started Phantom Liberty, but then I stopped, went back to the main story and finished that because I wanted to start a new character because I had already used my one respec accidentally. And so my stats just weren't where they were. I didn't know how to play the game. So I was basically just an assault build. And now I'm into Act 2 already on my second playthrough, and it's going way better.
Yeah, I'm going to have to break that out again. It's been a while. It's a good game.
It's a great game, dude. They've made a lot of changes. I told you, I think last week that I hadn't had any issues with it. I feel like once I got Phantom Liberty, I started seeing a few more crashes. Like my game crashed a few times.
I kind of remember having a couple situations like that after Phantom Liberty, but
yeah, I turned off a lot of the fancy like visuals, and I think it got way faster.
That's all that matters these days.
Nah, dude, it doesn't matter to me.
You get the 5090, and then you just have it make fake frames, and that's how you play video games these days.
Overlay that on top of my PlayStation somehow.
Yeah. Real quick before we wrap up, I posted a link to Local Thunk's blog, the guy who created Bulletproof. He had a really awesome timeline of, I think he's been like just making games for like 10 years or something on the side just for fun. And then happened to give his friend Bulletproof like the early version of it. And he has started this blog recently to kind of document his process and stuff. And I thought it was super cool because he was, that's weird that my friend is like actually playing my game a lot. And then also going through the stress of like, he ended up getting a publisher, then they were doing marketing for him so he could do play testing and hang out with his Discord crowd and all that to figure out how to make the game what it is today. But then like his health issues, he had an anxiety attack and he thought he was having a heart attack or something. And just the stress of like, I got to deliver on this game and whatever. was fascinating to read. And then somewhere recently, I think I said he sold 15 million copies, and it's 10 or 15 bucks. And I'm sure that the publisher takes a good cut and whatever else, but he's done very well for himself. And he said he made like 600K the first few hours of being live on Steam, but he has documented the dates that he remembers and like the Steam wish lists towards the end before it launched. And it's cool because he like had over 100K wish lists on Steam. So if you got 100,000 people who've said, I would like to be notified when this game is released, you're going to have a good first day.
Yeah, on Steam, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I love the first line. Dang. The first line is the creation date for the template, a folder in my Learning Lua directory. And I love that, dude. Dude, shout out to this guy. Cool. I love to see people like this make it, dude.
Me too. Yeah. It's just so like neat to see those stories because you're like, any of us could have done that too. He had so many years of practice making games for the fun of it, and then like eventually struck gold, literal gold, basically. And yeah, it's just one of those things where it's, if you're any bit entrepreneurial, it's a great story to read and think about how you can do that for yourself. Because what most people struggle with is ever getting to that point where it's, holy crap, there are a lot of people interested in this that I never imagined. And that's the thing you're looking for. How do I get to that point? When GoRail started, that first year, I woke up one day and had 600 emails from MailChimp. You have 600 new email subscribers to your newsletter. And I was like, for what? Why? And it was somebody submitted GoRails to Hacker News. And I was on Hacker News #2 all night. And people missed Railscast. They were talking about that and whatever. And I was like, not trying to replace Railscast, but I know that I missed it and a lot of people did too. And that was my first taste of that. You've done something and now you're overwhelmed by the response. And that's a great, great sign. So, all right, I got to jump, go work on RailsConf and stuff. So I will catch you next Thursday, man.
Yes, sir.
All righty. Peace.
Later.